All right, photo staffers, back here for our second video lesson. Going to be building on what we've already learned, which was cropping. So in this video lesson, we're going to talk about the next two probably most important things in photo editing besides cropping, and that's fixing what's called your tone and your color. Tone simply means the amounts of darks, lights, and midtones. That's your middle values. Think of it in terms of kind of like blacks and whites, even though you're dealing with color image. In Photoshop, we often refer to the levels, and that term's going to come up. So your levels is how you're going to fix the tone, the lights and darks. And then we're also going to be dealing with color balance. We're going to be fixing some color cast, and then we're actually going to do some more interesting effects with color to change them so they fit our artistic mood and message. All right, so let's get started first by going to File, Open. This is going to get easier, so I'm going to go a little bit faster. Remember, we're going to go to the Courses folder. From here, we're going to open up Art, go to Yearbook Lesson Files, and let's go ahead and start first with the tone image and click Open. Remember, because this is my image, you can't save back to the folder, so you're going to save it to your Edits folder, which is a good habit to get into, so you're always saving to your Edits folder rather than saving over your original file. So I just went to File, Save As, go to Save on your computer. We have to navigate to your folder this time, out of the Courses folder, down to our Yearbook folder, and then Edits, and you're just going to leave it set as Tone, and we're going to click Save. Click OK to this dialog box, and we are ready to roll. So we're going to crop, but remember, I told you I like to crop at the end after I do all of my edits, so that's what we're going to do today. So we're going to click on the Move tool just so we get out of that crop tool. That's this one up here on the left. It really doesn't matter what tool you select, just so long as you don't have that crop tool selected so you don't get that annoying crop line. All right, so to fix tone and color and any of our other image adjustments, we're going to apply them as what's called an adjustment layer. So you need to open up your layers panel. I'm going to close this so we can see where it is. To open up your layers panel, you're going to go to Window, Layers, and then this dialog box that's called a panel should pop up. Your panels can get sandwiched over here, so if you're a Photoshop guru, you can sandwich it. You know how those work, but we're not going to take a deep dive into panels. If you are really interested in Photoshop, what I suggest you doing is taking the computer graphics class, because we do a deep dive in Photoshop. All right, so think of your layers as like layers of a cake, but instead of visible layers, they're transparent, and you can add as many layers as you want. You can add in images that show up as layers as well, but we're just dealing with one layer, and we're going to do adjustment layers on top of this. So think of them like adding a clear piece of plastic over the top where you can see the layer that's beneath it. All right. As I said, we're going to apply them as adjustment layers. So underneath at the bottom of your layers panel, there's this little icon here. It looks like a half of a circle. And if you let your cursor hover, it should say Create New or Fill Adjustment Layer. We're going to click on that button, and then this should pop up or pop down. These are all your basic image adjustments. So you have these for our we use to fix the tone. We're almost always going to use levels, but feel free to experiment with brightness, contrast, curves, and exposure, especially as we get into learning the exposure triangle. This one will make more sense to you. The second grouping down has to do with your color, and we're going to get into that later today, but we're just basically focusing on these two groups, and we're going to click on Levels. When you do, this box should pop up. Stop the video and do this now. All right, right now it's not going to look like anything has happened, but I want you to notice in your layers panel, see how you have this showing up here? Also, I want you to notice how there's an eye icon next to it. What the eye icon does is it turns things on and off. Right now, it's just transparent. There's nothing on this layer. I can even take my background on and off, if that makes sense. But on our adjustment layer, make sure the eye is visible, and you want to make sure that this is grayed out. It's active, because it's telling us any changes that we make, it's going to put it on this layer. So this is your histogram for the tone. And remember I said we talk about tone as layers, as levels. This is your histogram. It represents the amounts of darks. This is your black triangle here. This represents your darks. This is your midtones, and this is your lights. Notice we have a spike here, and we don't have a lot of blacks. So we want to increase the blacks. We're going to move this out of the way so we can kind of see this in real time happen to our image. With this black triangle, we're just going to move it in a little bit. Notice how our image is starting to get darker. But to me, I think it's overall a little too dark. So I'm going to take my midtones and I'm going to lighten them up. So I'm going to go to the left a little bit. And if I want to make my whites or my lights really pop, I can move that. Now, before we close anything, we're going to see the before and after. So I'm going to click on my eye, before and after. Notice how before it was pretty drab. We didn't have a lot of contrast. Now, if we turn it back on, notice you have some nice dark darks, some midtones, and you have some light lights. When you're happy with it, you just close that box. Right? Now let's say hypothetically that we did this yesterday, we came back and today we're like, oh, you know what, I think it actually maybe is a little too dark. This is why we put it on as an adjustment layer, because I can make edits to this. I can come back any day later and I'm going to double click on or this the little half circle, that's your levels. It's going to pop this box back up, and notice I can continue making changes. Okay, and then you just close it again. That's it. That's tone and levels. It's pretty simple to mess with your tone to fix the balance. Before we close this though, we're going to crop, because remember we crop as our final step. I'm going to grab my crop tool. Let's change our size because we're not doing a portrait here. Instead, we're dealing with a landscape. So let's change it to 5:7. And we're going to set it to vertical. So if you have to flip-flop it, if it's set to horizontal, I want you to flip it so it's vertical. And we're going to move it so that we have this really nice diagonal from the water coming in from the bottom right and all the way going up to the top left, and click enter or click the check mark. All right, go to File, Save. Save on your computer and hit save. Now, I'm going to show you something. Notice it popped up a weird dialog box. I'm going to show this to you, but you don't have to open this up. If I go back to that edits folder, oops, hold on, I didn't go all the way through. There we go. Something was on my other screen. That's why I didn't go all the way through. We are going to go back here. So we're in our edits folder. Notice we have that original tone. This is what it looked like before. The cropping isn't there. That's because this is the new file. This is our file that we did all of our adjustments to and we did the cropping to. The reason it's showing up like this is because of this, our layers panel. Whenever you have more than one layer, you have an adjustment layer, anything else besides just your background layer, it's automatically, when you save, it's going to convert it to a PSD file. All of our files that we've been doing in this class up until now are using, they've been JPEG primarily. They might have been a PNG. Some of us who use iPhone might have had a slightly different file, but most of the time they're universal file formats. That's why we can see them. Photoshop files are not universal. That means they only open on Adobe products, and specifically the Creative Suite products. So Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. So I would keep them in this native format. Okay, that's good. But in order to use it, to send it, to do anything else with it, we do have to export this back as a JPEG. So you should still have this file open. Okay, if not, reopen it. But instead of simply going to File, Save, or Save As, we're going to go to File, Export, Export As. And then it's going to open up this dialog box. Okay, you want to make sure that the format is set to JPEG. Notice there's also GIF and PNG, but we're always going to set it to JPEG. Always make sure for this class your quality is just set to high. And then you're going to hit Export. Now it's going to ask you basically when you want to export it to, so you're going to have to navigate back to your yearbook folder where we're saving everything in, go back to your edits, and we're going to save it in there. Remember, we already saved it once, so do we want to replace it? Yes. Now I'm just going to check it. I'm going to go back. And for some reason, oh, there it goes. Notice now it changed, it updated. So that's our JPEG now. So now I have it as a PSD, and I now have it as JPEG. I can always go back later days and continue to make changes, because if I reopen that PSD file, I still have my adjustment layers. I have all of that good stuff. All right. So that's tone. That's your levels. That's your darks and lights. We're going to go ahead and we're going to do one last thing with this, but before we do, we're going to save it under another file. So this is how you save copies. You just have to resave it, but under a different name. So we're going to go to File, Save As, save on your computer. We're going to leave it as a Photoshop file. We're going to call it Tone, and we're going to call it Mask. So Tone Mask, and hit Save. If this box pops up, just click OK. So now we have a new document. I'm going to show you how to do a masking vignette. So a vignette is when you have an image. I'm going to pull it up really fast here, just so that you can see it. Sometimes it's easier to understand something if you have a picture of it ahead of time. So these two images, this one here and this one here, have examples of what's called a vignette. A vignette is when the outside edge changes in tone or color. In this case, the tone gets lighter. In this case, the tone gets darker, but that's a vignette. And we're going to do that, but we're going to do it through a special process. So we're getting a little bit advanced here. This is masking. Masking simply means that you are just selecting part of the image rather than all of it, because we want to darken the outside, not in the center part. The way you do that is you apply a stencil, which in Photoshop is called a mask. To do that, you have to have a selection, basically, right? So we're going to do that. We're going to, up here in our toolbox, the easiest way to do a vignette is through a elliptical marquee tool. So click on this drawer, like hold it down. When you hold it down, the drawer should pop up. I want you to slide to the elliptical marquee tool. Now a vignette is feathered. That means it's not a sudden change. It kind of feathers, softens, so it gradually goes from dark to light or light to dark. In order to do that, you have to put a feather on this. And it depends on the size of your image. The bigger the image, the bigger your feather needs to be. I always like to start with 100. It's a nice number to start with, and then you just have to try it and see if it works or not. So with a 100 feather, we're going to take this tool and we're just going to click and drag. We want a nice oval in the center. If you release your cursor, you can move that. Okay, so stop the video, and with a 100 pixel feather, I want you to click and drag an elliptical marquee. All right, excellent. So we have a selection.
Alexis Jacobson.
But on this, we actually want to darken the outside, because if I were to darken right now, it's going to darken what's inside this oval. I want to darken what's on the outside. So I'm just going to flip the selection. I'm going to go to Select, Inverse. And now it has the area around it selected. So we're going to apply an image adjustment again, now with a mask stencil. So we're going to click on our image adjustments again. Let's just go to brightness and contrast. We could do it under levels, but we're just going to go to brightness and contrast. This is going to pop up, and we're going to scroll our brightness in and out. Notice, because I have a mask on here, it's just doing it on the outside edges, not on the inside. I know I've got it as a mask because if you look in your layers panel, you have that stencil is now applied. When you're happy with it, close it, and we're going to go to File, Save. We're just going to save it, and now we're going to export it. We're going to go to File, Export, Export As. Make sure it's set as a JPEG, hit Export. We're just going to leave it as Tone Mask, JPEG, and hit Save. Okay, so just to be clear what we did today, just going back. So in your yearbook edits folder, you should have a tone and a tone mask JPEG file. And you can tell the difference because it's darker on the edges. You probably also should have your tone mask and your tone Photoshop files in there. All right, now we're ready to move on. Hopefully I'm not throwing too much at you. We're going to close that. And we're going to move on to color. All right. This would be a good time to stop the video if you're nearing the end of a class so that you know where you're at. I would document the time because we're going to move on to color. All right, if you're still with me, we're going to go to File, Open. And we're going to open up the file that says Color Balance. We're going to immediately save this. File, Save As. On your computer. Make sure you are back in your yearbook folder. Edits. We're just going to call it Color Balance and click Save. All right, you'll want your Layers panel open, so a reminder if it's not, Window, Layers. Okay, mine's check mark, which means it's out. And we're going to fix our color balance. Just like we did with the tone, we used a levels adjustment layer. So we put it on its own layer. We're going to do that again. Where do we go to get our adjustment layer started? Hopefully you said down here. We're going to click, but remember these are the tone ones, these are the color ones. We're going to go to Color Balance. It's going to open up this dialog box. And because this is a CMYK image, you can control the amounts of cyan, magenta, yellow. Those are your three main colors. If it's RGB, you would just, it might flip-flop and it might have red over here, the red, green, blue on this side. Doesn't make any difference. But you're just going to change your tone and, your colors, not your tone. I always like to make sure that it's set to midtones. Okay, because what it's going to do is it's going to take the middle values, so like kind of like your grays, your midtones, and you can adjust those. So I can make it more, my midtones more or less red or cyan blue. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to fix a color cast. I'm going to close this for a second. I'm going to delete that because I want to start it again. I'm going to go to my color balance. Here's the trick. In order to figure out what the color cast is, I already know. I can tell there's an imbalance of color here. I can tell there's too much of one of these colors. But to you guys, the novice, you probably can't tell. So the easiest way to figure out what your color imbalance is to grab your zoom tool and zoom in on an area that should be white. So the horse should be white. So I'm going to zoom in really tight, like really tight on the white area. What color do you notice, especially down here? If you said yellow, you're correct. There's an imbalance of color. There's too much yellow in this image. To zoom out, you can do one of two things. You can either double click the hand tool in the toolbox, or with your zoom tool, pull down the Alt key and scroll and you can zoom out. Okay, so just want to zoom out. Holding down my Alt key and I'm scrolling. All right, so we have an imbalance of yellow. So that means you're going to go away from the yellow. So I can go away from the yellow. I'm going to go to the blue. And this is another reason I like the adjustment layers, because I can turn it, this is before, after. Now do you see the yellow imbalance? You probably didn't notice it, but now you do. I'm also looking into me. I can tell there's probably a little bit of a balance of too much red too. So I'm going to go to my cyan. I'm going to push it to the left. And again, I'm just going to better, worse. Am I making it better or making it worse? All right. Then my next step is I probably would also try it with my highlights and my shadow. So I'm going to go to my highlights. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to fix those. And if you're really smart, you would write down these numbers. And then I'm going to do with my shadows as well. So again, this is before. Notice how yellow it was after. If you are feeling very uneasy on just sliding them, you can always pause, go back to the video, and type in the exact values as you see here. Okay? When you're happy, go ahead and close that. All right, now I think it's pretty washed out. So we're going to fix the tone. We're going to review it. So let's hit on our adjustment. We're going to go to levels. Remember, that's our tone. Notice you have a lot of grays, not a lot of blacks, not a lot of whites. So I'm going to move in my darks. I'm going to shift my midtones just a little bit to the left. I think the image is a little dark, and I'm going to bump up my whites. All right. Again, before, after. You see, you're just touching up. You don't want these to look over edited. That's the trick. All right, next up. So this is our basic color, but we're gonna go just a tad bit further, and we're gonna go deeper into masking. Last time we just used a simple selection. We put a feather on it. This time we're actually gonna apply the mask using what's called a quick mask method. So I need you to reset your colors here. So if it's not black on white, this little button here is gonna reset those colors. It's gonna put it as black on white. So click that to make it black on white. And then below that, there's this little button here called Edit and Quick Mask Mode. I want you to click on that. It's not gonna look like anything has happened. You wanna make sure that you are on the background layer, however. So if when you did this, either your levels 1 or your color balance layer shows up, we need to get out of quick mask mode. The way you do that is click back here on that button. You're out of quick mask mode. Click on your background layer. Now click on that quick mask mode again. So now our mask is going to be applied here. All right, ready to go? All right, the way a quick mask works is you paint it on with a brush rather than using those elliptical or the marquee tools. So you need to grab the regular brush tool, which is up here. In the drop down, we want a soft edge brush. So click on your drop down and you want to pick a soft edge brush. And then to get your size, it's set to 600, which is pretty big. If I come into my image, I'm not doing anything. That's about the size of the brush, which I think it's okay. I'm going to go down just a little bit. That might be a little too much. Let's go to somewhere around 300. You can type it in too if you want. All right? So we've got a nice soft edge brush. Let's double check to make sure the opacity is set to 100%. And then what we're going to do is we're going to change the color of the horse, because I feel like the background color is good, but I feel like the horse maybe not, it almost looks a little too blue to me. But I can't do an image adjustment layer for the color across the entire thing. I want to do it just on the horse. That's where those masks come into play. Just like we did with the vignette last time, now we're going to do it just specifically around the horse. So you do it simply by clicking. And you'll notice it kind of already has a natural feather. It should look like it's painting red. Don't worry about it. That's what it should be doing. All right, to fine tune our mask. So let's say I did that. I'm like, oh, no. I don't actually, that's not part of it. All you have to do to remove it is flip your colors. So that white's on top with your brush, and it will erase that mask. So white erases the mask, black puts that mask on. All right, do that until you're happy with it, till you feel like, yeah, it's over the horse. Now we have to get out of quick mask mode. So we're just going to click on this button. This is a good way to know, did I get all of it in? I didn't. See how there's a little, I missed that out. So I just go back into mask mode, grab my brush, I need to add it. I left it out. All right, and then I'm going to go back out. What part is selected right now? Yeah, it's the outside, not the horse. So we need to inverse it just like we did last time. So you're going to go to select, inverse. So now I have just the horse selected, because now I want to do a color balance adjustment layer with just this area selected. So now I'm going to go back here, click on my color balance, and watch what happens. So now if I change this, change my colors, I thought it was a little too blue, so I'm going away from the blues just a little bit. And again, I can do before, after. And you can see the stencil getting applied here. All right, so go ahead. If you want to do the exact numbers, red was set to plus 30, green was plus 4, and blue was negative 10. All right, and then close that. And then one final thing that I would do before I crop is I'm just gonna double check. I'm gonna turn these on and off. And if I don't like one of those, I can go back and fix those. All right, let's go ahead and apply our crop. So let's grab our crop tool. And we're gonna leave it set as 5x7. And we're just going to zoom in on the face of the horse just a little bit. Not much. We're not gonna cut much off. And then click OK. All right, so we're gonna go to File, Save As, Save on your computer. It should pop us right back up to our edits folder, but remember we have multiple layers now, so it's going to convert it to a Photoshop. We're going to call it Color Balance and just click Save. All right, if I'm completely done and I want to turn this photo in for an assignment, or I want to send it somewhere, or I want to get it printed, I have to export it as a JPEG because it's Photoshop. We can only view it in Photoshop. So as a reminder, you go to File, Export, Export As. This is going to pop up. Make sure it's JPEG. Hit Export. Again, it's going back to our Edits file. Color Balance. Yep. And click. Do we want to replace it? Yes, because it's just saving over that original one that we saved in here. So I'm just going to check that so we can see. Going back up and back into the folder just helps us so it refreshes. Yep. So there's my finished color balance as a JPEG exported, and there is the Photoshop file. All right, that was a lot. So we're going to stop this video for today, and we're going to go next into photo filters, which are your color presets. Much easier, much more fun. So go ahead and stop the video, and I'll see you back here for photo filters next.